Okay, everyone, we can go ahead and get started. My name is Sophie Maria, and I'm a consultant with Guidehouse supporting CDC's WinLab initiative. A couple of notes about the webinar before we dive in. If you are experiencing any technical issues during the webinar, please feel free to email the WinLab inbox for support at winlab@cdc.gov. If you have questions throughout the session, please insert them into the Q&A function below, which is represented by the Q&A icon. We'll conduct a Q&A session at the end of this presentation where we will review questions and do our best to provide answers. Please note that I posted the link to the live captions in the chat. However, please ensure that both the captions window and this webinar window remain open if you choose to use them. Today, we'll start by discussing new WinLab resources. Then we'll introduce today's presenter. We'll have about a 10-minute Q&A session at the end where we'll review questions and do our best to answer. And then today's session will end with a discussion of upcoming events. For today's webinar, we will be leaving the chat box open for your engagement. When you're using the chat box, please adhere to the established rules of engagement. You can feel free to use the chat to connect with others by reacting to what you're hearing, sharing your experiences, and asking questions to fellow participants. If you have a question for the presenter, please use the Q&A function, not the chat. Additionally, please engage with respect and professionalism. Any inappropriate language, improper conduct, or form of discrimination may result in removal from the webinar. If a moderator provides direction regarding chat behavior, please comply accordingly. Lastly, please notify moderators if you experience technical difficulties or observe any disruptive behavior. I will now turn it over to our WinLab lead, Alicia Branch, to share some of our new and relevant resources.
Thank you, Sophie. Before we start the main presentation, I'd like to take a moment to share the free educational materials from Ready, Set, Test, a helpful WinLab resource related to today's topic. The Ready, Set, Test resources include a booklet, a self-assessment checklist, and an e-learning course, which are valuable tools for training healthcare professionals or individuals without a healthcare background who conduct patient testing under a CLIA certificate of waiver. Now, the booklet includes forms and logs that can be used regardless of the point-of-care testing methods or the location where tests are conducted, as well as a self-assessment checklist for best testing practices. The booklet and the checklist can be downloaded or obtained in hard copy by clicking the link in the chat. The e-learning course is a scenario-based training that explains the steps of the WADE testing process. After completing the course, 1.5 contact hours of PACE credit can be earned. You can access the course by clicking the link in the chat. Next slide, please. I will read the CDC external speaker disclaimer statement and then introduce today's speaker. Slide decks may contain presentation material from panelists who are not affiliated with CDC. Presentation content from external panelists may not necessarily reflect CDC's official position on the topics covered. Next slide, please. I am excited to introduce our presenter, Dr. Elise Wu. She is board certified by the American Board of Clinical Chemistry and serves as the medical director overseeing clinical chemistry, immunology, toxicology, point-of-care testing, and clinical pathology informatics at Geisinger Health Systems. She is also a professor of pathology at Geisinger College of Health Sciences. In 2016, she was named to the 40 Under 40 Top 5 by the American Society of Clinical Pathology. Her primary interest is improving laboratory testing utilization and operational efficiency. She often speaks on point-of-care testing and is eager to share her insights on the importance of clinical partnerships in ensuring quality and safety of point-of-care testing. Our WinLab test presenter for today is Dr. Elise Wu. Over to you, Elise.
Thank you for the introduction. Let me
You're
switch
welcome.
over to share my slide. All right, can you guys see my slide? Thumbs up, anyone?
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. Again, thank you for the introduction and invitation to speak with you guys today. This is one of the topics that I'm really truly passionate about, and hopefully we can have some good discussion at the end of the presentation. I don't have anything to disclose. I'll be mentioning a few of the point of care testing device throughout my presentation, but I don't have any financial support from them. In my talk today, I will briefly talk about how laboratory, who laboratory partner with, including nurses, medical doctors, pharmacists, respiratory therapists, and towards the end, I will talk about a slightly different idea about thinking about patients as someone that we partner with directly. And we'll also go through what my team at Geisinger does in terms of point of care testing. I think the service that we provide really help in terms of that, strengthening that partnership. And throughout the presentation, I'll focus on two general topics. One is how the partnership help with test selection, and the other is the clinical testing protocol. But first, a little bit about where I work. Geisinger Health System is in central Pennsylvania. We provide continuum healthcare to about 4 million people in 45 Pennsylvania county. We have 10 hospital campuses and about 160 primary and specialty clinics. Here's a map to help you see where we are. Showing you here is the state, Pennsylvania. In dark green is our primary service area, and in red is about 10 hospital that I was mentioning about. And throughout the green and these light green color, we have the 160 specialty and primary clinics that serve our patients. And let's zoom in on point of care testing. Throughout the entire hospital system, we currently have 8,400 point of care testing operators, 1,000 of which also perform non-wave testing, and 58 of them perform microscopy. Our test volume is about 1.4 million a year, of which about 800,000 is glucose tests, about 47,000 is ISTAT testing. Beside ISTAT and glucose meter, we also have Clinitec to do urinalysis testing, and we have Coagulcheck to do PTINR, DCA Vantage to do HbA1c, and a few AVOX meter, HemoQ, and Cardiolipin, Cardiocheck lipins tests. We also have menu tests in our system. They include GastroGold, HemoCode, mono tests, pH paper for fluid testing, Strep A, urine drug screen, and urine pregnancy tests. So I'll next focus more on the test selection and management part of things. And let's go through this and looking at a few cases. So in many of my clinic, we have the Strep A test available for physician to use. One of the clinician was trying to increase the sensitivity of the test by increasing the incubation time. So the problem with this is that, first of all, we don't know if increasing the incubation time is going to really help improve the test accuracy. In theory, it sounds like a good idea, but if they wanted to do that, it's something that we have to do a validation study. The other complication of this is if we make changes to the test system instruction, the test will no longer be considered wave test. And I will talk about this a little bit later if we change a test from wave to non-wave or LDT. There's a lot of regulatory work that is involved. So you can really just change the test, but the provider doesn't know. And let's look at the second case. In this case, the nurses wanted to do an ISTAT test, but didn't have a plain syringe with her. She had a saline syringe that she found in her pocket. So to save time, she expelled the saline in the syringe and then dropped the blood samples for CAM8 testing. And this is your first poll questions. What do you think would happen to the lab results? I hope you guys can see the poll that should be showing up on your screen. The poll should be up. I don't know if I can see the results.
Elsie, it looks like 82% chose option C.
All right, I think I'm talking to a lot of lab people, so you guys all got the right answer on this, which is great. But hopefully through this two example, you can see that the provider may have the best intention, which is they want to get this done faster. They want the result to be accurate as in the first case, but they don't fully understand the implication of what they do and realize that even a small deviation in testing procedure can have negative impact. So through lab partnership, I really think it is key in ensuring good lab results and preventing potential serious events because when we see these type of issue, we'll provide additional training and education. Let's look at two more cases. Many of you may know that there's a new traumatic brain injury test that is available with ISTAT Infinity, which helps rule out intracerebral hemorrhage. So when our provider in EMS and sport medicine know about it, they were very excited and want to implement it on the field so they can triage patient and save time by bringing the patients to the ED. But there are a couple problems with that. And this may just be a Pennsylvania thing, but because the test is non-wave, in Pennsylvania, DOH actually doesn't allow us to use non-wave tests outside of a healthcare facility. So from a regulation standpoint, it will be very difficult to implement in the way that they want. And this is your second poll questions, case 4. Similar to that, sales rep from company Y visited a clinic and dropped off a glucose meter and test strip for trial. My question to you is if they can use it to perform patient testing. I'll give people a minute to do the poll. I can see the results coming through. So I see that no one picked option A, which is great. Again, I can see that I must be talking to all the lab people. Even though it seems like it's a good idea to use it because it's free, from a regulation standpoint, the biggest issue is that the glucose meter that is dropped off is not for hospital use. There is very clear FDA have very clear clearance on whether the device is clear for home use or hospital use from a point of care testing standpoint. Another concern that we typically have from a lab standpoint is we want to make sure that we know if the test result is accurate before we use it for patients. And another is about infection control. One of the reasons that the home use device and the hospital device are very different is that the home use device, you don't have to worry about too much about infection control because it's not going to be used by multiple people. But in the hospital setting, one device would be used by for different patients. So we always have to have infection control protocol in place. So in the last two cases, one of the things that I wanted to highlight about is that tests can have wave tests versus non-wave. From an FDA standpoint, typically when it's wave, the test is considered simple with minimal chance of error, so long manufacturer's instructions are followed to perform testing. And non-wave test typically requires more advanced training. From a oversight standpoint, wave testing are a lot easier to manage, but for non-wave, there usually are a lot more regulation that we need to follow. One of the things for non-lab people who may be on the call is that lab regulation is complicated. There is federal regulation like CLIA and FDA regulation that we have to follow, but there's also state regulation like DOH, like the one that I was talking about, the new TBI test. Pennsylvania may be different than your state. And on top of that, the accreditation bodies like CAP or Joint Commission, they can be a little more strict in how they interpret those lab regulations. So it's really not all that easy to make sure we are compliant. Even though I have been doing this for close to 15 years at this point, there are often times that I still have to go back to look at the regulations word to word to make sure I didn't misinterpret it. Finally, on top of the lab regulation, there are different highly recommended guidelines. The one that all of you probably know on this call is the CLSI guideline. Even though they're not considered regulation, oftentimes they're so highly recommended that we do want to follow them. So one of the things that the lab does is that we help ensure regulatory compliance. The two things that I was talking about whether a test is wave or non-wave, is one of the first things that I always look at when I'm thinking about point of care testing, because it also dictates personnel qualification, as in who can be qualified to run the test, or who can be the supervisor or lab director. So all those are complicated. And on top of that, the lab also makes sure that we have a good SOP in place, which have very clear guidance on how often quality control needed to be done or calibration is needed, as well as training and results reporting to make sure we're compliant, as well as being able to perform the test as accurate as we can be. One of the questions that actually get asked pretty frequently is whether wave testing requires a lab license. Most of you, again, on this call probably know, but based on the regulation, yes, even wave testing does require a clear license in order to perform testing. So in our health system, even just with all the certificates, we have close to 100 of them, and we need to closely monitor the certificate for expiration dates and manage payment to make sure we renew them in a timely basis. That's one of the things that my point of care testing team actually do, so that we can make sure the license application is correct as well as not expire. Because of all the testing location, we also coordinate with DOH to make sure the inspection are done. And of course, we help the our provider to understand the regulations so that we can be compliant. Another things that my team does is to have good standard operating procedure. We develop them, as in we write them and have them review it, as well as we make sure they're annually reviewed and updated. And if there's any need for changes or make it more clear, we also make that changes. Quality control, our team review them monthly to make sure that they are all completed and there was no quality issues. We also perform reagent verification when we get a new lot of reagent. And we also make sure the device is set up in such a way that when QC is out, it will be shown on the device so the user knows that the quality metric is not being met. Our team also help manage patient testing for results that for device that can be interfaced. We work with IT to make sure that the device is interfaced and the results is filed incorrectly. And for tests that doesn't have that capability, we also work with IT to set them up in our EHR so the provider can do manual edit on the result entry field to document the results properly. And I think a lot of our users don't fully understand setting up device interface often is not that simple and requires a lot of work. And even after we initial set it up, oftentimes there's a lot of maintenance involved and software upgrades. My team also makes sure those get done in all our devices. Related to that is network connectivity. If there's ever an issue with, which actually happen relatively frequently, our team help troubleshoot the issues and work with IT to resolve it. We also have a good record in our middleware that store all the patients' information, all the patients' data, the ID together with the result. And if the user scanned the wrong patient span and have the wrong result filed to the patient's chart, we also make those corrections. For the equipment, there's a lot of upkeep on that. We provide all the equipment maintenance for the users, and if it's broken or doesn't work or malfunction, we also work with the floor to have them replaced if needed. There's a lot of inventory management that occur for point of care testing. Some of it include like the reagent that we talk about, but it also include making sure that nothing is expires. So my team do floor check on a monthly basis, and they also check the quality of the supplies, like I mentioned earlier, and all the inventory actually, all the reagent actually come into my central team. And then when the floor need additional order, they order from us so we can have a better control of the quality. For training and competency, we provide training material, and once training is completed, we will give the our user a badge, which have their point of care testing specific ID number on it. And we track to make sure that all our operators have their competency done in a timely manner. And if something they didn't do something right, we'll also provide remedial training. On safety, like the infection control that I was talking about with the glucose meter, we develop those safety policy and audit, and then we also implement plan if there was any issues. So all those we have provided a lot of values to our users to enhance test accuracy and performance, as well as test selection. What I wanted to shift gear a little bit is about clinical utilization. And in this part of it, I'll focus on talking about all tests inherently have test limitation. It's about understanding the test limitation so then we can prevent error and make sure it is being used in the right group of patients. And then also talk about the need to target a specific group of population if we really want to drive outcome. One of the examples that I talk a lot about is urine drug tests. Showing you is one of the drug test cup that you can find in many companies. These tests, I mean, they are what they are. It's not that the tests are bad. It's just that the results are considered presumptive. What I meant is that they could have false positive and or false negative. If not interpreted carefully, it could have really bad outcome. For example, we strongly advise against using this test for pre-employment drug screen. And the reason is that if someone have a false positive on this drug cup, it would cause someone to lose a job or interview. And similarly for pain management, it is just as big of a problem. The idea of using a tox testing for pain management is to make sure the patient is taking the drug that they're supposed to be taking. But oftentimes, these cups may not screen for the drug that you may be interested. For example, if your patient is on Ritalin, they may not be. Well, there's no cup that's screen for Ritalin, so you'll come up as negative, and if you misinterpret those results, sometimes it could lead to wrongful dismissal of patients from their treatment program. Another test that we use is the PT-INR point of care testing. There are multiple devices that can do this now, but in our system, we limited the test to our medication therapy management pharmacists. So it's a much smaller group to use to manage patient who takes warfarin. And the reason that we limited to a small group of users was because there is some discordance between the PT-INR on the device compared to the core lab results. So if they are not used to seeing the result, there is a possibility of misinterpreting the test results and then cause patient to have the wrong dosage adjustment for their warfarin. So these pharmacists were trained to understand that the results are only comparable within 20 to 25%, which is quite a big range. They are also more in tune with what the results mean and would ask the lab to recheck if needed. One of the questions that often come up is that sometimes the ED would be thinking that, oh, can we use this to check if for stroke patients? The answer is no. As far as I know, all the PT-INR point of care device out there are only clear to be used for patient that is on warfarin only. So the two examples that I talk about, the main point is that I want to come across is that there are test limitations on any of these devices, and it may not always be obvious to our providers. So the lab really should communicate the limitation to the provider when selecting test method and as well as during training to minimize the issues. The next things I want to talk about is that oftentimes we think about when there's a test, people must be using it since they asked for it to improve outcome. And that's actually not really true. And I'll talk about this example about our experience in launching the HbA1c DCA test. So the project, we have really good collaborator with the diabetes care team as well as the Geisinger Health Plan in the system to launch this project. And the initial goal of the project is really to target patients with HbA1c greater than 9. It takes a long time to get the instrument set up, interface, and all that. But even after we have it finally set up, we have seen that the test wasn't being used as often as we thought. And in addition, we didn't really see a clinical impact to the patient, as in the number of patients who have high HbA1c remain high. So we work on it and form multidiscipline team, which include the nutritionists, pharmacists, ops people, the clinic staff, and the case manager. What this team does is that they have a list of patients with high HbA1c, and each week this team will discuss their recommendations for the treatment plan, follow-up plan for these patients, and the recommendation would then be reviewed with the clinical staff and providers during daily huddle. And I think this daily huddle is important because that also helps the clinic providers make sure that the A1C testing is done. And with that, the provider was able to provide recommendation and next step to the patient. In addition, these patients are being followed up every 30 days with a member in the care team. So the result was pretty dramatic. With the launch of that collaborative effort, we were able to see a reduction of patients with high HbA1c, showing you in the graph example of free clinic. The y-axis is showing you the percent of patients with HbA1c greater than 9. So you can see that in all cases, we were able to bring that percentage down. And you can see that the result was really dramatic in clinic number 2, where it was reduced from 54.3% to 26.3%. So it is really important to have a process in place, and particular to look to see what obstacle was there and how to overcome it, and also to be able to track the clinical effectiveness with data. I think that really helped our users to see how their effort has played out. And with the partnership between lab and providers, I really think that we were able to have a integrated and coordinated care model, which improved operation and regulatory compliance, as well as enhanced clinical utility of lab testing, ensures accountability for quality, care, and cost, and ultimately that improve patient experience and care. So far we have talked about patients in a little bit indirect manner, even though the end goal is always to improve their care. But I want to shift gear a little bit to talk about patients as more a direct partner. At-home testing probably is not foreign to any of you. Many people have used various at-home testing. Many and at-home testing have been in the market for a very long time. For example, pregnancy tests, glucose tests, and fecal or cold blood testing. In 2027, the world kind of changed with the 23andMe or Ancestry.com arrived the scene. Those are the first company that does genetic testing and offer at-home testing. 2012, HIV test was another hallmark, as well as many other tests like ovulation test kit, drug of abuse test, and now you can find everything, including allergy testing, fitness tests, and of course, no one will forget about COVID-19 and all the COVID testing that was available for us to use. One of the things that's important to really think about is that not all the at-home testing are equal. This is funny articles that I found from 2018. The headline is say some genetic tests apparently can tell if you're a good dog, if you're a dog or human. So apparently what this news station did is that they sent one reporter's DNA to a handful of home DNA tests to compare the results. And in addition to sending the reporter's DNA, they also sent the DNA from a lab retriever. While most company was able to figure out that the the lab retriever samples was not readable. One of them that didn't seem to notice that and have a 7-page report praising how good the cardiac output and muscle forces is of the dog. So hopefully this highlight that they are not all the same. While this seems to be funny, this other articles that I found may be more serious. I found this one in Lab Economics, the September 2023 issues. Apparently, a Massachusetts resident was considering filing a lawsuit and call Everlywell's food sensitivity test snake oil. She elite the test worthless and claimed that the test results wrongly indicate what she was sensitive to or what she was allergic to, right? But let's look at this a little bit more closely. I went to Everlywell website, and this is just a quick screenshot to show you guys they have multiple different food-related testing. So I think it may not be easy for someone to figure out which one to buy if they wanted to know if they have food allergy. At least to me, I mean, now I know, but at the time it's a little confusing as to what is food sensitive versus what is food allergy test. And then from a consumer standpoint, I guess someone would be wondering if a more expensive test is necessarily better. And of course, what does the test results actually mean, right? If you have a positive result, does it mean that you're allergic to the food? So all in all, is very confusing. And in case you guys are wondering, hopefully you can see that the food sensitive test is the one that tests for IgG, and the allergy test tests for IgE. IgG, if you think about it from your immunology class, is really a memory antibody. Positive IgG test is a sign of normal immune system and suggests tolerance or that you have taken the food, not necessarily food allergy. IgG test is typically not recommended for evaluation of food allergies. IgE test is confusing though. Typically, we think about IgE test as an allergy test, but for food, if you have a IgE positive food test, it actually does not necessarily mean that you are presenting with food allergy. In fact, when I talked to board-certified allergists, they said that patients who have a positive IgE test, they have a higher risk of developing actual food allergy if they stop eating the food. So it is actually pretty convoluted, and this is actually one of the tests that is often misused even by our primary care physician. What am I trying to say? If you're concerned about food allergy, my 2 cents is that instead of getting tested done yourself, you may want to see a board-certified allergist physicians to understand like whether you truly have food allergy or you may be prone to having food allergy and what's the next step. Here's another examples of misinterpretation of at-home tests. During the COVID pandemic, this was one of the papers that published and showed that 1 in 3 people misinterpret at-home COVID tests. In this particular incidence, they're looking at people who have a high pre-test probability. So for example, with recent contact with infected individuals or new onset of COVID-like symptoms and a negative at-home test results. In this group of patients, 33% of people fail to quarantine, even though the standard authorized instructions say otherwise. And here is how the standard authorized instruction show. And then the study make a nicer interpretation guide, as you see here, with happy face and and otherwise and different color. And with this interpretation guide, only 14% of people fail to quarantine. So that's a significant improvement. The point is that we need to be more consumer centric when we're trying to communicate to our end user who may not be FDA looking at the package insert or another scientist. Easy to read guide is really helpful. With the increased use of at-home testing, AMA, which is the American Medical Association, also have concern and have this article that say growth of self-directed testing raises risk of patient confusion. And a lot of it has to do with either inappropriate test interpretation, which is what I was just talking about, or inappropriate test selection, and sometimes it's incorrect test performance. So I really think as lab professionals, we can do more than what we have been doing. I think we need to start thinking about our consumers, patients as our partner and provide more guidance to them to ensure safety and quality by assisting them with the test selection and how to use the test as well as results interpretation. With that, I would like to end by just mentioning a few people that did a lot of the work. Most of the work that I was talking about at the beginning of my presentation is from my team, my point of care testing team that was led by Beth Ambrose, who is our system manager for that team. And some of the example that I was able to show you guys, I really think kudos to the collaborative effort and culture at Geisinger. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Elise. We'll take a few minutes to answer as many questions as we can. If we can't address your question today, we'll do our best to respond by email. And if you have any questions after today, feel free to email the OneLab inbox at onelab@cdc.gov. Okay, well, let's dive in. Presenter says, thank you for a great session. How do you document and monitor critical results notifications, and what is the turnaround time for notifications?
Because it's point of care testing, that doesn't go through the central lab for notification. We rely on the users to communicate the results directly to the clinical team when they're on the floor.
Okay. Another presenter says, fantastic presentation with over 100 CLIAs. Does each CLIA director approve the SOPs? Is approval sign off via printed binder of SOPs or documents control systems?
So that's a good question, and it's somewhat complicated. Some of them actually do sign off with our policy manager system, which is our electronic document policy control software that we use. But because there's so many of them, there are quite a few that we still use the printed process because it actually is easier for the smaller clinic.
Have you experienced success or challenges with manual test entry and inclusion of all results reporting requirements, such as reference intervals?
Yeah, so we set it up so that they have to enter the QC. That was one of the challenges that we have previously where QC was not always entered. So we set up right now that when they enter the patient's results, they also enter the quality control, and the reference intervals is preset in the electronic health record, so they wouldn't forget.
Okay. We have quite a few questions. What they wanted to know: how many point of care coordinators, supervisors, and managers do you have?
I currently have one system manager, and I think I have 5 to 6 coordinator. And the way we set is based on region, so then they don't have to travel too far. So for example, I have one for the Western, and I think in Central region, I have 2. Northwest region, I have Northeast, I mean, I have another 2. So it's somewhere around 5 to 6, and I'm actually working to add more because we're going to take over more point of care testing in the system.
Okay. To add, how much space do you currently have to operate all your activities that you mentioned? Do you think you have enough space to perform your activities? If not, what do you do to overcome your shortcomings with relationship to space needs?
I think that's a tricky question. I don't think anyone would ever say they have enough space. But I would say that what we have is pretty nice. We struggle for a long time on space, and so sometimes we basically just in the system wherever space we can find. So it's not always right at the lab, is what I meant. If we can find a space elsewhere. Recently, things have gotten better because we did build a new hospital lab for our one of our location. And when we did that, that was more intentionally designed to include space for training as well. But that's not the case for every single one of my hospital. Some sites, like I said, we have become very very flexible, and we do training on the floor and use that space. So it just depends.
Someone would like to know, why was Clinic 2 much more successful than 1 and 3? Did they do anything different?
So I don't think we did anything different. If in that 3 clinic that I show, everyone was able to hit about low 20% in terms of the number of patients who are greater than 9%. I think what it shows is that if you follow the protocol, it will get you to the baseline of about low 20% of high A1C patient. Clinic 2 looks more successful from the standpoint that they were bad to begin with. So the changes look a lot more dramatic.
Okay. We'll answer about 3 more questions. So a center wanted to know, when adding additional wave tests or removing tests that are no longer used, what is the best route to do this to update the CLIA agreements?
I'm not 100% sure what the question meant. I guess they are not talking about how to update the CLIA certificate. I guess they're talking about how to get buy-in to get the provider to understand that that may not be the best test. We do that 2 different ways. One is that we have a lab testing committee. So things get discussed in that testing committee, and and then we will either have, the stakeholders say, Dr. Smith from Clinic 3 actually have the question. We may include Dr. Smith to come to the meeting and discuss his concern, but other time we will just disseminate the information to others. Typically, if we do remove the test, sometimes we do it site by site as we are able to address it and talk to the provider at that location. The other time, if it's a urgent clinical issues, like there's a recall or the company, something bad happened. Those happen more dramatically. Those go through the medical director of certain group as well as our risk partner to make sure those information get disseminated. I hope I answered the questions.
Let's see. Trying to find one that won't kind of take a lot. This is a good one. They want to know, how do you design company assessment for point of care testing? And it also is in relation to this question as well. How do you manage point of care at a clinical level? They actually struggle with the clinical staff as well in getting training for them, competency and QC documentation. So you talked about the size of your lab, and I think that they kind of want to know, how are you actually training your staff to make sure that they are competent in whatever the point of care testing that they're doing?
Yeah, again, I want to make sure people give kudos to my team who does the actual work. They have actually really good relationship with the floor. They tirelessly remind them that, hey, your competency assessment is due, we're available at this time, we'll work with your schedule and help you get them done. I cannot give enough kudos to my team to make sure like they basically go after people who doesn't have the competency assessment done in a timely manner. And if it did happen that they didn't get it done, then unfortunately we do have to escalate within that group to let their manager and director know that, hey, the users, unfortunately, we have to remove the access to the device because they haven't complete this. So that's kind of how we go about it. The same thing as making sure quality control is done. I think that's actually have two main things that I want to talk about. One is to make sure that your quality control program is not overly stringent. What I mean is, if you have a test that is really good, and then if you ask them to do that every day, that may be difficult for them to comply. But if you say, okay, every Monday, do this, then maybe it's a little bit easier to put in their workflow. So I think it's just a matter of making sure people understand what the requirement is and what they can handle, and then go from there. But my team do check to make sure that they are done in a timely manner. And then again, if the floor forgets, they'll get reminder, and if needed, it will get escalated. Yeah.
Okay, that's all the time we have for questions. And I want to say thank you, Elise, for an excellent presentation, and we look forward to having you back again. Can we pull up the slides, please? I want to briefly highlight an upcoming OneLab Network event that's occurring on August 27th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The event title is Biosafety and Microbiological and Biomedical Laboratories, 6th edition updates. Clinical Laboratory Biosafety Recommendations, presented by Nancy Cornish. The registration link is posted in the chat. Next slide, please. Oh, you're already changing. Thank you. As a reminder, the slides and audio recording of this event will be posted on our OneLab Test website within 2 weeks of today. And you can find the link to our OneLab Test website in the chat. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we encourage everyone to use the OneLab inbox to share your training needs and feedback about OneLab Test with us. We actually use your input to understand the community training needs and to determine the topics of our webinars. The OneLab email address is posted in the chat for easy access, but I'll give it to you. It's onelab@cdc.gov. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.